Free yourself from what you cannot control. Stoic wisdom for inner peace. The illusion of control. Picture this. You're stuck in traffic, already late for something important. You grip the steering wheel tighter. You check the time again. You switch lanes, hoping it'll move faster. It doesn't. Your heart races, your mind spirals. And yet, no matter how tense you become, the traffic does not move 1 second faster. Now zoom out. How much of your day looks like this? How much of your mental energy is spent trying to influence, manage, or force outcomes that were never really in your hands? How many hours have you lost this week alone, rehearsing conversations that haven't happened yet, replaying ones that already have, bracing for futures that may never arrive? This is the illusion of control, and almost every human being on the planet is living inside it. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Our ancestors who tried to predict and control their environment survived longer. The brain that anticipated danger, that planned ahead, that refused to leave things to chance, that was a brain built for survival. Control was safety. And so, deep in our wiring, the need to control became one of the most powerful drives we have. But here's the problem. The modern world has taken that ancient drive and turbocharged it. We now live in an age where we can order food, manage relationships, track our health, and shape our public image, all from a single device in our pocket. We have more influence over our environment than any human generation before us. And paradoxically, we are more anxious than ever. Why? Because the more we believe we can control, the more we suffer when we can't. Every expectation unmet becomes a wound. Every plan disrupted becomes a crisis. Every person who doesn't behave the way we need them to becomes a source of frustration. We have confused the ability to influence with the ability to control, and that confusion is costing us our peace. Look around at the people you know, including yourself. Notice how much energy is poured into managing perceptions, curating what others see on social media, carefully crafting messages to land just right, performing a version of yourself designed to elicit a specific response. Notice how much mental bandwidth is consumed by monitoring, checking whether someone replied, whether the numbers are trending the right way, whether things are still on track. This is the illusion in its most modern form. The belief that with enough vigilance, enough effort, enough optimization, we can finally get the world to cooperate. It never fully cooperates. And the gap between what we demand and what life delivers is precisely where suffering lives. The hidden cost of this illusion is enormous. It shows up as chronic anxiety, the constant mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios. It shows up as resentment, the anger we feel toward people and circumstances that refuse to obey our expectations. It shows up as exhaustion, the deep fatigue of a mind that never truly rests because it is always managing, always calculating, always bracing for what might go wrong. And perhaps most insidiously, it shows up as a diminished capacity for joy. When you are constantly scanning for what could go wrong, you lose the ability to fully inhabit what is going right. The meal in front of you, the laugh of someone you love, the quiet beauty of an ordinary afternoon. All of it filtered through the lens of what still needs to be fixed, secured, or controlled. There is a way out. Not through more control, but through a radical shift in where you place your attention and your energy. Over 2,000 years ago, a group of Greek and Roman philosophers developed a framework so precise, so practical, and so psychologically sound that it is still transforming lives today. It is called Stoicism, and it begins with a single, deceptively simple question: what is actually up to you? The Stoic Divide. Around 300 BC, a philosopher named Zeno of Citium began teaching in a painted porch, a stoa, in Athens. What emerged from those teachings would eventually become one of the most influential philosophical schools in Western history. But it was a former slave, centuries later, who would distill its most essential insight into a few unforgettable lines. His name was Epictetus, and he opened his most famous work, the Enchiridion, with words that cut straight to the heart of the human condition. Some things are in our control, and others not. Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not in our control are body, reputation, command, and, in one word, whatever are not our own actions. This is the dichotomy of control, and it is the single most important idea in Stoic philosophy. Read those words again carefully. Epictetus is not saying that external things don't matter. He is not telling you to be indifferent to the world. He is drawing a precise line, a boundary, between two fundamentally different categories of existence. In the first category, your judgments, your intentions, your desires, your responses. These are yours. Fully, completely, undeniably yours. No external force can reach inside and take them from you. Even in the most extreme circumstances, poverty, imprisonment, illness, these remain within your domain. In the second category, everything else. The weather, the economy, other people's opinions, your health outcomes, the traffic, whether your email gets a reply, whether your business succeeds, whether people like you. Now here is where most people resist. They say, "But I can influence those things." And they're right. You can work hard and increase your chances of success. You can be kind and increase the likelihood that people will respond well. You can exercise and improve your health. The Stoics never denied this. The distinction is not about influence. It is about ownership. You own your effort. You do not own the outcome. You own your words. You do not own how they land. You own your intentions. You do not own the response. This sounds simple, but sit with it for a moment and feel what it actually means. It means that your peace of mind can never be held hostage by anything outside that line. It means that failure does not define you. Only your response to it does. It means that other people's behavior is not your responsibility to control. Only your reaction to it is. Let's make this concrete. Think about the last time you were deeply stressed. Trace it back to its source. Was it something in the first category? Something that was genuinely within your power to change? Or was it something in the second? Something that you were treating as yours to control, when in reality it never was? In most cases, if you're honest, it was the second. The stress came not from what you could do, but from your refusal to accept what you couldn't, from the insistence that reality be different from what it was, from the invisible war between your expectations and the actual world. The dichotomy of control dissolves that war, not by changing the world, but by changing the contract you have with it. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. Epictetus. This is not a philosophy of passivity. It is a philosophy of precision. It teaches you to invest your energy where it actually has power, and to release the exhausting grip on everything that was never yours to hold. The dichotomy of control is the foundation. Everything else in Stoicism is built on top of it. Learn it, live it, and watch how the weight of the world begins to lift, the weight we carry. Imagine waking up every morning and strapping on a heavy backpack before you leave the house. Inside that backpack, you've packed everything you're worried about. What your colleague said yesterday, whether your presentation will go well, what your ex is doing, whether your parents approve of your choices, what strangers think when they look at you, whether the future will unfold the way you've planned. You carry it everywhere. To breakfast, to work, to bed. You never take it off because somewhere in the back of your mind, you believe that carrying it is the same as managing it, that worrying is the same as preparing. It isn't, and the backpack is crushing you. This is what attachment to the uncontrollable looks like in daily life, and it is far more common and far more destructive than most people realize. It doesn't always announce itself as anxiety or fear. Sometimes it looks like overthinking, replaying conversations, second-guessing decisions, mentally simulating every possible outcome. Sometimes it looks like resentment, a slow, simmering anger toward people who didn't behave the way you needed them to. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism, the relentless need to manage every detail of every outcome because the alternative, trusting the process and releasing the result, feels unbearable. Sometimes it looks like rigidity, an inability to adapt when life doesn't follow the script you'd written for it. And sometimes it looks like control disguised as love. The parent who cannot stop managing their adult child's decisions. The partner who monitors and corrects and guides because the vulnerability of truly trusting feels too dangerous. The physical toll is real. Chronic stress, the kind produced by sustained attempts to control the uncontrollable, elevates cortisol levels, disrupts sleep, weakens the immune system, and accelerates aging. This is not metaphor. The body keeps score, and the score reflects every hour spent fighting battles that were never yours to win. Research in psychoneuroimmunology consistently shows that the perception of lack of control is one of the most reliably damaging stressors a human being can experience. Not the event itself, the perception. Which means the suffering is, in large part, a product of the mind's relationship to what is happening, not just what is happening. The mental toll is equally severe. A mind that is constantly in control mode never fully rests. It cannot be present because it is always somewhere else. In the past, analyzing what went wrong, or in the future, bracing for what might. The present moment, which is the only place where life actually happens, becomes almost impossible to inhabit. Here's the paradox. We carry these things because we believe that holding on keeps us safe. But the opposite is true. The tighter we grip, the more tension we create. The more we try to manage what we cannot manage, the more helpless we feel when it slips through our fingers, as it inevitably does. The first step out of this pattern is not willpower. It is not positive thinking. It is awareness, specifically the awareness to ask, is this actually mine to carry? Most of what fills that backpack is not. Other people's opinions of you, not yours. The outcome of a project you've already given your best to, not yours. Whether someone forgives you, not yours. The past, not yours to change. The future, not yours to guarantee. And here is the thing about awareness. It requires honesty. Real honesty. Not the kind that says, yes, intellectually I know I can't control this while the hands stay clenched. But the kind that actually looks at each item in the backpack and makes a genuine decision. I am choosing to set this down. What remains when you set all of that down? What is actually, truly, undeniably yours? That is where your freedom lives, and it weighs almost nothing. Letting go is not giving up. There is a word that stops many people before they ever give Stoicism a real chance. That word is acceptance. To a culture obsessed with hustle, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of more, acceptance sounds like surrender. It sounds like settling. It sounds like the philosophy of someone who has stopped trying, someone who has looked at their dreams and decided they weren't worth the fight. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics were not passive people. Marcus Aurelius led one of the most powerful empires in human history, and did so through 2 decades of near-constant warfare, plague, and political intrigue. Seneca was a statesman, playwright, and advisor to emperors who navigated the most treacherous court in the ancient world. Epictetus, despite beginning his life as a slave, built a school of philosophy that shaped thinkers for centuries. These were not men who sat quietly and let life wash over them. What they understood, and what took each of them years of practice to truly embody, is a crucial distinction: the difference between accepting what is and approving of what is. To accept something does not mean you think it is good. It does not mean you will not try to change it. It means you are willing to see it clearly, without the distortion of denial or the exhaustion of resistance. It means you start from reality, not from the reality you wish existed. And that starting point matters enormously, because you cannot effectively respond to a situation you are refusing to fully see. The Stoics had a concept for this. They called it amor fati, love of fate, not tolerating fate, not enduring fate, loving it, not because everything that happens is good, but because everything that happens is real, and real is the only ground you can build on. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, and do so with all your heart." Friedrich Nietzsche, centuries later, would arrive at the same idea. My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it. This is not weakness. This is perhaps the most demanding practice in all of Stoicism. It asks you to stop wasting energy fighting the unchangeable, and to redirect that energy toward what you can actually do, right now, with what you have. Think of a sailor caught in a storm. The passive sailor curls up and prays for calm waters. The reckless sailor fights the waves head-on and exhausts himself. The wise sailor, the Stoic sailor, accepts the storm completely, adjusts the sails, and navigates with skill. The storm does not change, but the sailor's relationship to it transforms everything. And here is what most people miss. The acceptance itself is what makes decisive action possible. When you are no longer spending half your energy resisting reality, the other half, which was always there, suddenly becomes available. Creativity, problem-solving, genuine courage. These faculties don't flourish under the weight of denial. They emerge when the ground beneath you is clear. Letting go in the Stoic sense is an act of profound intelligence. It is the recognition that your energy is finite and precious, and that spending it on things outside your control is the most expensive habit you will ever have. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to, but wish that what happens happen as it is, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. Epictetus. The moment you stop demanding that life be different from what it is, you discover something extraordinary. You still have choices. You still have agency. You still have the capacity to act with excellence. But now you act from a place of clarity instead of desperation, from strength instead of fear, from freedom instead of compulsion. Letting go is not giving up. It is the beginning of showing up, fully, powerfully, and at peace. Your thoughts are your territory. There is a frontier that no army can cross, no authority can seize, and no circumstance can invade, unless you allow it. That frontier is your mind. The Stoics called it the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the sovereign part of the self. It is the part of you that observes, interprets, and assigns meaning to everything that happens. And according to Stoic philosophy, it is the only thing that is truly, completely, and unconditionally yours. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea again and again in his Meditations, a private journal he never intended for publication, filled with reminders he wrote to himself during some of the most turbulent years of his reign. In one of his most famous passages, he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice what he did not say. He did not say you have power over everything. He did not promise that life will be fair, that people will be kind, or that your plans will succeed. He said you have power over your mind, and he implies, through the entirety of his writing, that this is enough, more than enough. It is everything. Here is the mechanism. Between any event and your response to it, there is a gap. It may feel imperceptibly small, almost non-existent in moments of high emotion, but it is there. And in that gap lives your freedom. An insult lands. Between the words entering your ears and the emotion flooding your chest, there is a fraction of a moment where your mind interprets what just happened. It decides, is this a threat? Am I diminished? Should I retaliate? That decision, that interpretation, is yours. It is not automatic. It only feels automatic because you have practiced it so many times. The Stoics called this fantasia, the impression that an event makes on the mind, and they taught that wisdom begins with the ability to pause before you assent to that impression, before you decide that the impression is true, before you let it drive your behavior. This is the practice of what the Stoics called epoche, the suspension of judgment. Not a permanent suspension, but a deliberate pause. A moment of sovereign authority over the mind's first reaction in which you ask, is this impression accurate? Does this event truly mean what my first instinct says it means? More often than not, You will discover that the initial interpretation was colored by fear, by ego, by past experience, and that the reality seen clearly demands a very different response. In modern language, we might call this cognitive reframing. Psychologists have built entire therapeutic systems around this exact insight. But the Stoics were there first, and they went deeper. They didn't just want you to think differently in difficult moments. They wanted you to build a mind so clear, so well-trained, that the default response to adversity was wisdom rather than reaction. This is not suppression. You are not pretending the insult didn't happen, or that the loss doesn't hurt, or that the injustice isn't real. You are simply refusing to be dragged by it. You are exercising the one sovereignty that can never be taken from you. Your thoughts are your territory. Guard them, cultivate them, return to them when the world tries to pull you outside yourself. That is where your peace lives. That is where your power lives. And no one, not circumstance, not other people, not even time itself, can take that from you. Emotions as messengers, not masters. Let's clear up one of the most persistent myths about Stoicism, the idea that Stoics are emotionless. The popular image of the Stoic is someone cold, unfeeling, and robotically rational, a person who has deleted their emotional software and replaced it with pure logic. This is not Stoicism. It was never Stoicism, and believing it is one of the most common reasons people dismiss this philosophy before they've truly encountered it. The Stoics were deeply interested in emotions. They studied them, categorized them, and wrote about them extensively. What they rejected was not emotion itself, but the uncritical surrender to emotion. The difference is subtle but transformative. They distinguished between passions, the irrational, unexamined emotional reactions that cloud judgment and lead to suffering, and eupathia, what we might translate as good emotional states, or healthy responses that arise from wisdom and clear perception. Joy, not manic pleasure. Caution, not paralyzing fear. Wishing well for others, not desperate craving for their approval. The Stoics were not trying to feel less. They were trying to feel better, with more depth, more authenticity, and more alignment with reality. It is worth noting that even Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who wrote perhaps the most psychologically rich document in Stoic literature, was not a man without emotion. His meditations reveal grief, frustration, longing, and tenderness. What distinguished him was not the absence of these feelings, but the quality of his relationship to them. He felt deeply. He was not destroyed by what he felt. Think of an emotion as a messenger. When fear arrives, it is carrying information. There may be a threat nearby. When sadness arrives, it is carrying information. Something you valued has been lost. When anger arrives, it is carrying information. A boundary has been crossed or an injustice has occurred. These are valuable signals. Dismissing them entirely would be foolish. Silencing the messenger doesn't resolve the message. It only ensures you remain uninformed. But here is the question the Stoics would ask. Are you reading the message, or are you being dragged by the messenger? There is an enormous difference between feeling fear and being controlled by fear, between feeling grief and being consumed by grief, between feeling anger and acting destructively because of it. The emotion is not the problem. The unconscious fusion with the emotion, the belief that you are your feeling rather than someone who is having a feeling, that is where suffering compounds. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, articulated this with remarkable precision. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Frankl arrived at this insight through unimaginable suffering, but the Stoics had mapped that same space 2 millennia earlier. Here is a practical tool, a 3-step emotional audit you can use in any moment of heightened feeling. Step 1. Name it. Simply identify what you're feeling without judgment. I am feeling anxious. Not I am anxious. The distinction matters. You are not the emotion, you are the observer of it. Step 2. Interrogate it. Ask, what is this emotion telling me? What does it believe is true? Often you will find that the emotion is based on an assumption, one that may or may not be accurate. Step 3. Choose your response. Now, from that small but crucial distance, decide how you want to act. Not from the heat of the feeling, but from your values, your judgment, and your clearest self. With practice, these 3 steps begin to happen almost simultaneously, not as a mechanical procedure, but as a natural expression of a trained mind. The pause becomes instinctive, the distance becomes habitual, and slowly, over time, you become the kind of person who experiences the full range of human emotion, without being at the mercy of any of it. Emotions are not your enemies. They are part of your humanity. The Stoic practice is not to silence them. It is to become the kind of person who can hear what they're saying, without letting them write the script. The Art of Indifference. There is a Stoic concept that, on the surface, sounds almost inhuman. It is called apatheia. And before you recoil from the word, before the modern echo of apathy makes it sound like checked-out disconnection, let me tell you what it actually means. Apatheia is not the absence of feeling. It is the absence of being ruled by feeling. It is the state of equanimity, the ability to remain stable, clear, and functional, regardless of what is happening around you. Not because you don't care, but because your inner ground is solid enough to hold you steady even when the external landscape shifts. This is what the Stoics called the art of indifference, and it is one of the most misunderstood and most powerful ideas they ever developed. To understand it, we need another term, proegmena adiaphora, preferred indifference. This is the Stoic category for things that are desirable, but not necessary for a good life. Health, wealth, reputation, comfort, success, beauty. These are not bad things. The Stoics were not ascetics who believed pleasure was evil. They acknowledged that good health is better than illness, that financial stability is better than poverty. But and this is the crucial distinction, these things are not goods in the deepest sense. They are not what makes a human life truly excellent. Virtue is, wisdom is, justice is, courage is. A person with all the wealth in the world but no integrity is not living well. A person with perfect health but no courage is not living fully. And a person who has lost everything but maintains their character has lost nothing that truly matters. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. Epictetus. The practical power of this idea is immense. When you genuinely internalize that your well-being does not depend on outcomes, that success is something you pursue with excellence but do not require for your peace, something remarkable happens. You actually perform better. The pressure releases. The fear of failure diminishes. You act from a place of freedom rather than desperation. This is one of the great paradoxes of Stoic practice. The less you need a particular outcome, the more effectively you pursue it. Because the anxiety that comes from needing, from requiring, is itself one of the most reliable predictors of poor performance. It narrows focus, tightens the body, and clouds judgment. The surgeon who is terrified of making a mistake is more likely to make one. The athlete who is consumed by the fear of losing performs below their actual capacity. The speaker who desperately needs the audience's approval stumbles over words they know perfectly well. Athletes know this. Musicians know this. Anyone who has ever performed at their peak will tell you, the best moments came when they stopped trying to control the outcome and simply became fully absorbed in the process. Detachment from the result doesn't make you care less. It makes you present more. This is the art of indifference, to want things without needing them, to pursue outcomes without being enslaved to them, to play the game with full commitment, knowing that your worth, your genuine, unshakable worth, does not live in the scoreboard. The world can take many things from you. It cannot take your character. It cannot take your choices. It cannot take your dignity unless you surrender it. And when you know that, truly know it, you become, as the Stoics would say, free. Obstacles as teachers. In the 2nd century AD, a Roman emperor sat down in his private tent, likely exhausted from years of military campaigns along the Danube frontier, and wrote a note to himself. It was not a decree. It was not a strategy. It was a reminder. And it has outlasted every empire that ever existed. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius was not writing philosophy for posterity. He was coaching himself through difficulty. He was reminding himself, as he would need to do again and again, that the obstacle in front of him was not the end of the path. It was the path. This idea sits at the heart of Stoic resilience, and it is radically different from the way most people relate to adversity. The common relationship with obstacles goes something like this. Something goes wrong, and we experience it as an interruption. A problem to be solved so that life can resume. A detour from the real journey. We tolerate difficulty as a temporary condition, waiting for it to pass so that progress can continue. The Stoic inversion flips this entirely. The obstacle is not an interruption to growth. It is the mechanism of growth. Every challenge that meets you is carrying something, a lesson, a strength, a clarity, that could not have come any other way. Consider what difficulty actually develops. Patience cannot be built in the absence of frustration. Courage cannot be forged without fear. Compassion cannot deepen without loss. Resilience is, by definition, a quality that only adversity can create. You cannot become stronger in a frictionless world. The resistance is not the enemy of your development. It is the instrument of it. This is not toxic positivity. It is not telling you to smile through pain or pretend that hardship is secretly wonderful. It is something more honest and more demanding. The willingness to look at what is hard and ask, what is this making possible that nothing else could? A business fails. The lesson might be in the assumptions that were never questioned, the blind spots that comfort and early success had concealed. A relationship ends. The clarity it eventually brings might reveal something about your own patterns that years of comfort had obscured. The ways you had been asking someone else to carry what was always yours to hold. A health crisis strikes. The perspective it forces might reorder every priority in a way that ultimately saves your life. Not the biological one, but the meaningful one. The one where you finally stop postponing what matters. History is filled with examples of this principle at work. Abraham Lincoln failed in business, lost elections, suffered a breakdown, before becoming arguably the greatest leader in American history. The adversity did not precede his greatness. It produced it. J.K. Rowling was a single mother on welfare, rejected by 12 publishers before Harry Potter changed the literary world. The obstacle was not a pause in the story. It was a chapter of the story, perhaps the most important one. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the deep interconnection of all things, including the difficult ones. Nothing in life is isolated. Every setback is woven into a larger fabric. And though we rarely see the full picture in the moment, the practice is to trust that the obstacle is not arbitrary. It is instructive. Here is your challenge. Name one obstacle you are currently facing. Not a small inconvenience, a real one. Something that is genuinely hard. Now ask, if this obstacle were a teacher, what would it be trying to teach me? You don't have to like the lesson. You don't have to be grateful for the pain. You only have to be willing to look. Because the moment you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this making available to me? The obstacle shifts. It does not disappear, but it transforms from a wall into a door, and you discover, as Marcus knew, that the way forward was always through. Living in the present moment. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher and playwright, wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius that begins with one of the most arresting sentences in all of ancient literature. Omnia, Lucili, aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything, Lucilius, is not ours. Time alone belongs to us. He wrote this not as an abstract philosophical claim, but as an urgent warning. Because even time, the one thing that is truly ours, we give away constantly without thinking. We lend it to regret. We donate it to worry. We lose it to distraction. We spend it living in versions of our lives that exist only in our minds, the past that can't be changed, the future that hasn't arrived. And in doing so, we miss the only thing that is ever actually real: this moment. Seneca goes further in the same essay, De brevitate vitae, on the shortness of life, with a line that should stop every reader cold. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Life, he argues, is not short. It is squandered. The years are long enough, if we would only inhabit them. The problem is not the quantity of time we are given. It is the quality of presence we bring to it. The Stoics understood something that neuroscience is now confirming. Anxiety lives in the future. It is the mind's attempt to prepare for and prevent outcomes that haven't happened yet. And guilt, shame, and resentment live in the past, the mind's replay of events it cannot undo, hoping that enough rumination will somehow change them. Neither strategy works. The future remains uncertain, regardless of how much you worry about it. The past remains fixed, regardless of how much you revisit it. The only place where anything can actually be done, where you can act, connect, create, decide, or experience, is now. This is not a New Age sentiment. It is a practical conclusion drawn from clear reasoning. If your power only exists in the present, then any mental time traveling is a theft from the only moment where you can actually use that power. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present," not as a spiritual instruction, but as a strategic one. Every time the mind drifts backward into regret or forward into fear, it is pulling resources from the only time slot where life is actually happening. There is also something worth noting about the relationship between presence and meaning. The experiences that feel most alive, the ones we carry with us, the ones that seem to justify the whole enterprise of being human, are almost universally moments of complete presence. A conversation so absorbing that time disappears. A creative flow state where the self dissolves into the work. A moment of connection with another person so full and clear that nothing else exists. These are not moments of extraordinary circumstance. They are moments of extraordinary attention, and they are available to you right now in whatever ordinary life you are living, the moment you stop requiring the present to be different from what it is. The Stoic practice of presence is not about emptying the mind. It is about returning, again and again, with patience and without judgment, to the task, the person, and the moment in front of you. The ancient Romans called it hic et nunc, here and now. 2 words, 1 discipline, a lifetime of practice. And perhaps the most important insight, the present moment is not just where your power lives. It is where you live. The version of you that is perpetually in the past is a ghost. The version of you that is perpetually in the future is a projection. The version of you that is here now, fully inhabiting this breath and this moment, that is the real one. Everything else is noise. Come back to now. That is where your life is waiting for you. Relationships and expectations. Of all the places where the desire for control causes suffering, perhaps none is more intimate or more devastating than our relationships with other people. We love someone, and almost immediately, we begin to want things from them. We want them to understand us, to love us back in the exact way we need, to grow in the direction we believe is right for them, to be consistent, to be available, to never disappoint us, to be, in some essential way, different from who they actually are. This is not cruelty. It is a very human expression of love, tangled up with the very human desire for control. But it is a recipe for suffering, for both people involved. Epictetus addressed this with characteristic directness. He wrote about the experience of loss, whether through death, separation, or change, and offered a reframe that initially sounds almost cold until you feel what it actually means. Never say about anything, "I have lost it," but "I have restored it." What he means is this: the people in your life were never yours to own. Your child, your partner, your friend, your parent. They are, as Epictetus would say, on loan. Not as a diminishment of their value, but as a recognition of reality. Every relationship exists within time, within change, within the fundamental impermanence of all things. To love someone while also secretly demanding that they never change, never leave, never disappoint, is to love a statue, not a person. Real love, in the Stoic view, is love that does not need its object to be other than it is. It is love without the hidden contract. I will love you as long as you meet these conditions. It is love that can hold the person fully while also holding them lightly. This is not emotional detachment. It is emotional maturity, and it is extraordinarily difficult. Consider how much of the friction in your most important relationships comes not from what the other person is doing, but from the gap between what they're doing and what you've decided they should be doing. The partner who doesn't communicate the way you need. The friend who doesn't show up the way you'd hoped. The parent who still somehow doesn't see you the way you've always needed to be seen. In each case, part of the pain is real. Real needs, real disappointments. But part of it is self-constructed. The insistence on a script that the other person was never handed. The Stoic practice in relationships begins with a simple, uncomfortable question. How much of my suffering in this relationship is coming from who this person actually is, and how much is coming from who I need them to be? In most cases, the honest answer reveals that a significant portion of the pain is self-generated, not because the other person is blameless, but because the gap between who they are and who we've decided they should be is something we are maintaining, often more fiercely than they are. There is an important distinction here that the Stoics would insist upon. Accepting someone as they are is not the same as accepting harmful behavior. You can love someone completely and still set clear boundaries. You can release the need to control someone and still choose not to remain in a situation that damages you. Acceptance is not submission. The Stoics were not passive in the face of genuine harm. They were among the most morally courageous people in ancient history. What they refused was the pointless suffering of wishing people were different when the wishing changed nothing. The freedom that comes from releasing the need to control others is almost paradoxical in its effect. When you stop trying to manage how someone feels about you, you become more genuinely yourself, and often, more genuinely lovable. When you stop requiring someone to change before you can be at peace, you both become less defended, less reactive, more open. People cannot be controlled, but they can be met, truly met, in all their complexity, contradiction, and impermanence. That meeting without agenda, without hidden contracts, without the weight of unrealistic expectation, that is where love, in its most stoic and most human form, actually lives, building an unshakable inner core. Philosophy without practice is poetry, beautiful perhaps, but powerless. The Stoics understood this. They were not interested in constructing elegant theories about the good life. They were interested in living the good life, day by day, decision by decision, through every season of fortune and misfortune that reality could deliver. And so they built practices, deliberate, daily, unglamorous practices, the kind that don't produce immediate results but quietly transform the architecture of the self over time. The kind that, like physical training, only reveal their value when they are tested. When the difficulty comes and you discover, to your own surprise, that you are more solid than you thought. The most powerful of these practices begins before the day starts. Morning reflection. Marcus Aurelius began each day with a philosophical preparation, an anticipation of difficulty, not as pessimism, but as readiness. He would ask himself, what challenges might I face today? Where might I be tempted to lose my temper, my focus, my values? This is not catastrophizing. It is the Stoic version of warming up before a performance. You rehearse your best self before the moment demands it, so that when the moment comes, the response is already prepared. The firefighter who has trained the evacuation 100 times does not panic when the alarm sounds. You are doing the same, building neural pathways of wisdom before the heat arrives. Evening review. Seneca described his nightly practice in his letters. Before sleeping, he would review the day. What bad habit did I put right today? How am I better? Were my actions in line with my values? Not to punish himself for failures, but to learn from them. The day becomes a classroom, and the evening review is the lesson integration. Without this practice, the same patterns repeat indefinitely. With it, each day becomes a data point in a longer experiment. The experiment of becoming who you've decided to be. Negative visualization, premeditatio malorum. This may be the most misunderstood Stoic practice of all. It involves deliberately imagining loss, the loss of health, of relationships, of things you value, not to become pessimistic, but to become grateful. When you truly feel, even briefly, what it would be like to lose what you have, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The morning coffee, the conversation with someone you love, your functioning body, your freedom. The practice dissolves the numbness that comfort creates and restores the vividness of life that we so easily take for granted. It also builds resilience. A mind that has rehearsed adversity is not blindsided by it. When difficulty comes, and it will, the Stoic has, in some sense, already been there. Journaling. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is not a polished philosophical treatise. It is a journal, raw, repetitive, often circular. He wrote to work things out, not to perform wisdom. He reminded himself of the same truths dozens of times because he knew that knowledge requires repetition before it becomes character. Write, not for an audience, for yourself. Write what you're struggling with. Write what you believe. Write what you aspire to. The act of translating thought into language forces a clarity that thinking alone never achieves. It makes the invisible visible, and what you can see you can work with. Physical discipline, ascesis. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort, cold baths, fasting, physical hardship, not as self-punishment, but as training. The body and mind are not separate. A person who can endure physical discomfort with equanimity is building the same muscle they will use when emotional or circumstantial discomfort arrives. You practice being uncomfortable on purpose so that when life makes you uncomfortable without permission, you are not shattered by it. Modern expressions of this practice include cold exposure, demanding physical training, fasting, or simply choosing discomfort over convenience, deliberately, regularly, with full awareness of why. Defining your values. At the center of all these practices is a question that each person must answer for themselves. What kind of person do I want to be? Not what do I want to have or achieve or be seen as, but who do I want to be? The Stoics called this your daemon, your inner guiding principle. When your daily actions align with that principle, there is a sense of coherence, of integrity, that no external achievement can replicate or destroy. And when they don't, when you betray your own values, even in small ways, that misalignment is felt as a quiet erosion of the self that no amount of external success can compensate for. The inner core is not built in a single profound moment of insight. It is built in the 1,000 small moments when you choose, despite discomfort, to act in alignment with who you've decided to be. Each of those moments is a brick, and eventually, not all at once but undeniably, a foundation forms that can hold you through anything. Freedom is an inside job. Let's return to where we began. You're stuck in traffic, you're late, you grip the wheel, you check the time, you switch lanes. Nothing changes. But now, after everything we've explored together, something is different. Not the traffic. The traffic is exactly the same. What's different is you. You notice the grip. You feel the tension in your shoulders, the tightness in your chest. And instead of being swept into the current of frustration, you pause. You remember, this is not up to me. What is up to me is how I meet this moment. Maybe you breathe. Maybe you put on music that you love. Maybe you use the time to think about something that matters to you. Maybe you simply sit quietly, without resistance, and discover that even a traffic jam can be, in its own strange way, a kind of peace. This is what it looks like when Stoicism actually works. Not a dramatic transformation, not the absence of difficulty, just a different relationship with it, a gap, however small, between what happens and how you respond, and in that gap, something irreducible, your freedom. And now, at the end of this journey, I want to tell you a story. The story of a man who had every reason to be bitter, broken, and enslaved, not just by circumstance, but literally. His name was Epictetus. He was born into slavery in the 1st century AD, in the city of Hierapolis. His master, Epictetus, was himself a freed slave who had risen to become a secretary to Emperor Nero. At some point, as the story goes, Epictetus decided to test the limits of his power over Epictetus, and began twisting his leg. Epictetus said calmly, "You are going to break it." The master continued, "The leg broke." Epictetus said, "Did I not tell you that you would break it?" No rage, no pleading, no collapse. Simply, clarity. This was not emotional numbness. This was not the performance of calm for an audience. This was a man who had internalized, at the deepest possible level, the Stoic truth. You cannot take from me what I have chosen to hold inside myself. My leg is not me. My chains are not my identity. My freedom is not in my circumstances or the absence of them. My freedom is in here, in this ruling faculty, this sovereign mind that no master can reach. He was freed eventually. He went on to teach philosophy in Rome and later in Nicopolis. His students included senators, generals, and eventually, through the writings they preserved, an emperor. Marcus Aurelius studied Epictetus. A slave became the teacher of an emperor across time. And 2,000 years later, his words are still transforming lives, including, perhaps, yours. No man is free who is not master of himself. Epictetus. This is the final realization, the one that all 12 chapters have been building toward. External freedom is fragile. It depends on health, on circumstance, on the goodwill of others, on an economy and a society, and 1,000 variables you cannot control. You can have all of it and still be enslaved. Enslaved to your fear, your ego, your need for approval, your terror of loss. History is full of powerful people who were the most imprisoned of all, trapped by their reputation, paralyzed by their fear of failure, unable to make a single authentic choice because every choice was calculated for effect. Or you can have very little of it and be free. Genuinely, profoundly, unshakably free. Because you have done the only work that produces real freedom, the work of mastering yourself. This is not a destination. It is a direction. You will not wake up tomorrow having arrived. You will wake up tomorrow with another ordinary day full of ordinary frustrations, and you will have another ordinary chance to practice, to notice, to pause, to choose. Some days the practice will feel effortless. Some days it will feel impossible. On the impossible days, hold this. Every Stoic who ever lived had those days too. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in the middle of the night about failures of patience and losses of perspective. Epictetus, reminding himself of truths he had taught for decades but still needed to remember. Seneca, confessing in his letters that he did not always live up to what he preached. This is not hypocrisy. This is humanity. The practice is not about perfection. It is about direction. That is enough. That is everything. One decision, starting today. Not to control more, but to grip less. Not to manage more, but to accept more. Not to demand that life conform to your preferences, but to discover what becomes possible when you bring your full, sovereign, unshakable self to meet life exactly as it is. The door to freedom was never outside you. It was always here,